Are you searching for fulfillment? Discover true happiness. Stay tuned to Shalom World.
I'm here with Simon Carrington, who together with his beautiful wife Madeline was the founder of Fire Up Ministries. We're at the ROM 19 conference and you're speaking here, and you're speaking in particular to youth and your work with youth. And with ROM we're talking about building positive Catholic marriage culture. How do you start that with young people?
Yeah, awesome. I think we actually spoke to the parents here at this conference, more kind of speaking about we're hearing from the teens that we're speaking to, and we really feel called to, or we think that we need to start to build the marriage culture from a very young age. So when they're in high school, already getting them thinking about marriage, and just really trying to encourage them to have this hope. To actually get married, because we find young people today are quite wounded, they're quite hurt, they don't always have a great understanding, or there's no marriage in their life they look up to as something that they want to aspire to have. So we just try and through our own kind of witness, because we often speak together as a couple. We're just trying to instill that hope in them and get them thinking about marriage. And the main concept we really drive is, if we always say, if you hope to get married, even if there's a little bit in you that wants to get married, because there always is, to think about, your future spouse is alive and breathing right now, and that if that person is alive right now, then you can begin loving that person before you even meet them by the different choices and actions that you choose to make and not to make. And we find that concept is really helpful in restoring marriage culture starting from a very young age.
By speaking at Renaissance of Marriage and meeting with all the other speakers and delegates, what do you think you're going to take back to Fire Up Ministries?
We came to our first conference was last year, and we'd only been married 5 months at that point. We had notes to talk about for the next 3 months, right? So it was great that we were asked to speak at this conference, but primarily we came back for ourselves. I find that what the kind of content the speakers are sharing is unreal. I think firstly and most importantly, if I can live out my marriage, to the best of, or to what I'm able, the teenagers really, they can sense that witness, that authentic witness of how I love my wife and she loves me. And we often get, especially girls will ask, how do you know if he really loves you, or how do you know if you should marry this person or date this person? And they'll often say, how do I know if someone loves me as much as you love your wife? Because that's the kind of love that I want. And I think so the more I can work on my own marriage and just build that authentic love and intimacy with my own wife, that will really show in the talks that we give and the kind of stories and the examples that we'll give in the classroom. Look, it's really, really great to be here. This is a fantastic group of people. I certainly feel really humbled to have been asked to speak here. And certainly if I wasn't running a workshop next, then I probably would have gone to Mon's workshop, because that sounded really good. My wife and I, my wife's in the crowd today, but we were meant to do this as a couple, but we've got a 3-week-old boy who's come with us today, so I'm really excited. It's my first talk as a dad with him outside the womb. I used to always say, I'm still a dad, he's just not outside yet. So
All right, so what I want to share a little bit about today, obviously, as you would have heard from how Judy introduced me, I certainly mostly focus on youth ministry. So what I'd like to do, obviously in my workshop a little bit later, is I want to go through 5 points I think are helpful for all of us, whether you're a parent or a youth minister or a teacher, whatever role you might be in. My goal, and it's certainly in just over the last few months of prayer and really asking the Lord, what are you asking from me in my ministry and vocation? We really feel called to help to restore the sacrament of marriage and family life in our culture. And I feel very called to start from when they're young, in primary school, in the teenage years. I know you're all doing great stuff in whatever age groups you're focusing on, but certainly I think we need to understand the teenage heart. If we miss what the teenagers are going through right now, then we can't relay or offer how beautiful this sacrament of marriage is for them. So, although I am a dad, okay, I can't speak really as I've never had to parent a teenager. I've never had to talk about purity to my own teenager. But as soon as he can talk, I'll be having the chat with him. Don't you worry. But I suppose, why would you want to come today? Well, I suppose you're all forced to come to this one, but you can choose the next one. But why would you want to listen to me about how to parent purity to your teenagers at school if you're a teacher, or to your own children? What would I know about helping prepare them for a great marriage and a holy marriage one day? I want to speak from two different angles today. I want to speak firstly from the angle of a son. So obviously the way that my parents were able to parent purity to me, the sex talks that we had from dad or I had from dad and had from mum, there's things that worked really well from what they shared, and there were things that weren't done as well. And I've run everything by dad that I'm going to share today, and he's given me the thumbs up to share it. But I'm going to share a few things that kind of didn't really work or may have caused a bit of heartache or misunderstanding in how the gift of my sexuality was passed on to me. Then I'm going to speak from the perspective of a youth speaker. So speaking to thousands of kids, each year about this topic. What is it that I'm hearing in the schools? After every talk, we'll get kids that'll want to chat with us after, or ask more things, or share what they might be experiencing or going through. And I want to kind of help bridge that gap a little bit, because if we can understand what they're yearning for, what they're calling for, then I think in our roles as parents or as teachers in this area, then we can counter their needs much better. Very quickly, just to set the stage, I think the fact that we're all here today, we know there's work that needs to be done in this area. I think that's pretty clear. Obviously, I don't want to go through too much, but I think we all know that within high schools right now, the culture around sex and how kids will date each other and hook up with each other, it's not good, right? It's not a great kind of culture and climate out there, and certainly they are struggling in a huge way. And I think that's really important for us to understand. I'm learning more and more, even though I do talk a lot and talk quick and I stutter and can't get the words out. I'm trying to learn that I need to talk a little bit less and just to ask them, what are you experiencing? What are you going through? Because there's no point me, if someone asks me something, I can't just start shooting off an answer to them when I haven't actually heard their heart, and then given an answer, or the answer that they need. Because one answer isn't going to solve every teenager's problem or their question, or isn't going to relate to their heart. So teens, even though the culture is quite hard at the moment for the teenagers, they are yearning for love, they're yearning for the truth, and they're starving for the truth. I had someone just before ask me, you got a pretty tough job, right? You go into high schools and you're talking about chastity and purity and sexuality. How do the teenagers actually respond to that? And the honest answer is there's always a portion of the kids that hate what we're saying. That's the reality. There's always a portion that don't like it, think it's rude, it doesn't apply to them. There's always a group of kids, I think, that'll give the response that was a good talk, right? Which is not always a great thing to hear. That was a good talk, which means I listened through it, but it didn't do anything to me, right? And then there's always a portion of kids where it really will pierce their heart. And they'll want to chat with you after, they'll want to ask more questions or get more engaged in what you're doing or what you were speaking about. And I always take that, this is always great for me to see. There are kids that are really, really hungry for it. And the ones that might say it was good, or the ones that you don't hear from after, we never really know what God is going to do with what we've said after that anyway. So it's not up to us to judge that immediate response from them. I know certainly when I heard speakers come to my school, I never went up to them and said, that changed my life, but it did, right? So maybe in your ministry, you're thinking, no one's ever really said to me, Jude, you've changed my life. Well, I'm sure you have, right? I'm sure there is many people in this room that have had a huge impact on people, even if you never hear that feedback. So what I want to kind of talk about in my workshop today, I want to offer five ideas, 5 points that I think are helpful for every parent, youth minister, teacher to know about when we're when we're going to teach about marriage or this topic. Firstly, I think parents are the primary sex educators of their children. That is the most important point. I think that I can ever say parents are the primary sex educators of their kids. It is the responsibility of the parent to bring up this topic of sexuality with their teenager. I remember I had one dad come up to me once and he goes, I can't believe it, my kid's going to a good school, just found out that he's been watching pornography. I can't believe the teachers aren't talking about it, that the priest isn't talking about it. I said, okay, but have you had a talk with him about it? And he goes, no, that's not my job to do it. That's why I'm paying all this money for him to go to this school, right? No, I'm sorry, that is your role. You're his father, right? You need to take that on board and say, you know what, I am the primary sex educator and teacher of his entire person, not just when it comes to love and life and everything. You are the primary sex educator of your child. We're going to talk a little bit as well about there is no such thing as the sex talk, but multiple sex talks their entire life. There is no such thing as the sex talk. It's an ongoing one. Because I can just tell you quickly, when I had the sex talk from my dad, I wanted to ask more than I did before the sex talk, right? So the fact that we can't just open that lid on a child and say, right, there's the sex talk. Now don't talk to me about it until you're married, right? That's impossible for them, because once they know the topic, they need you then more than ever to guide them through what is only going to become harder and harder for them to understand and work through. So that's what we'll talk about in that one. Point number 2, I'll talk about understanding why teens will begin to experiment or act out on their sexuality. So what actually drives a teenager to go and hook up, make out, whatever they're doing. What is it? What are they not getting from home? What kind of love and healthy affection and affirmation are they not getting at home from mum and dad that is causing them to look for that fulfillment elsewhere? So we're going to talk about the importance of a healthy touch and affection from mum and dad and healthy verbal affirmation. The third point is going to be learn to say no, right, to your child or to teenagers. They need to have some boundaries when it comes to how they can date and the relationships they are getting into. Fourth point is going to be to keep an eye on their social media, okay? It's not being, we're not doing something wrong by, if we want to know what people are saying kind of offline, then we need to know what people are doing online as well. So we're going to talk about TV, music, texting, phones, the apps, and pornography as well, which is a huge issue line up today. And I'll give you some resources to help combat that. Finally, I think if you have been called to the sacrament of marriage yourself, this is kind of a good way to close. But the fifth and final point, which is probably the most important point that I can possibly say, is encourage your teens or your students or whoever it is that you've been asked to care for or teach, to encourage them to live out purity. We have to model a marriage that is Christ-centered ourselves. The best way that we can help young people hope for a great marriage, want a great marriage, okay, have to it does demand heaps of work and self-giving, but if we can live out our sacrament to the full and have a Christ-centered marriage, then that is going to give them something to look forward to, hope for, and want in the end. Lastly, I'm going to close with I kind of grew up hearing constantly what I shouldn't do with my sexuality. I knew all the things that there was an X next to, right? Don't look at porn. Don't date until I'm this old. I can't do this, can't do that, can't do that. There was all these things that I knew I could not do. And when I speak to teens today, they're very good at listing all the things the church says they can't do, right? What I think was helpful for me and has been helpful in my youth ministry work is to empower kids with what they can do. So this concept is a concept that changed my mind and my life, and I'm sure mine now marriage, was we always present this concept to the kids at the schools they can love their future spouse before they even meet them. Not simply by all the things that you're just not doing until you get married, but what are some of the things that you can do in order to prepare for a great marriage and a pure marriage. So I'll talk about a few of those things that I think have been helpful. Okay, so if you're keen for that, I'll see you at the workshop. Thank you.
Renaissance of Marriage conference been for you this year?
It's been like a family reunion. Because I've worked 20 years a priest, 21 years a priest this year, and there's some people here I married that are now working in the field of marriage and fertility. Other ones that I was ministers to when they were youth workers, and so that's lovely and just good solid stuff. And I come away with a greater boldness, I think. Maybe what we've been through, particularly with the marriage laws that change here in Australia, just coming back saying, no, the deep understanding of what we understand marriage to be as a light, and then, okay, we're feeling more secure in that, okay, we have this change in secular law, but it doesn't change the reality, and wanting to go there. So it's kind of a very affirming. And there's incidental things that have, like I went to the accidental counsellor course, so I really enjoyed. Some of the things I've been doing, but I was just so good to go, oh yeah, I need to do that. So these are little gems. I don't know, maybe it's just the vibe.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, they're just such good people. Yeah. We're all on the same page. We all know we're in a bit of a difficult time with the culture, but we know we've got something to offer, Yeah.
All right, well, thank you so much for having us here.
Oh, pleasure.
Thank you.
Father Jerry Brown and Stephen Conway, all the way from South Africa to Sydney, Australia. We're here at the Renaissance of Marriage Conference 2019. Father Jerry Brown has been a parish priest for 26 years in Port Elizabeth, South Africa, and Stephen Conway is from Durban, South Africa, and together they're on the international board of Retrovive, a ministry which focuses on keeping couples happy and rediscovering themselves in their marriages. Tell me, gentlemen, I was really interested. We focus so much in marriage about the romance of getting married at the beginning, and then sadly we also focus when marriages fall apart. Your ministry focuses on the part in the middle. It's almost like the turning point where it can go one way or another. And you're focusing on turning the misery into joy. Can you explain a little bit about how you do that?
We present a program called Retrify, and the program is a 3-phase program. We have a weekend initial phase, and then some follow-up sessions, and then continuing the Retrify experience. During the weekend session, one of the things that we concentrate primarily on is helping couples to communicate again at a deeper level, to communicate from to help them to be able to communicate what's going on in their emotional lives. Often, once we're past the romance stage in relationships, we move out of the head and into the heart, and it becomes something of a battleground where the facts seem to be right or wrong, and one is blamed or the other is blamed. Retrify provides tools to look at the emotions that are going on under the facts, and helps the couple to rediscover each other again and reconnect at that emotional level.
And Stephen,
Yes.
you were telling us about some of your stories and experiences in presenting Retrify. You said that sometimes couples, they don't come, they come to it looking always in the past.
Yes.
And you're trying to direct them to look to the future. Can you explain a little bit about that?
Yeah, we spend a lot of the weekend trying to get the couples to see where they are, to try and understand how they got to Retrify in the first place, and how are they going to be able to move on and get over the problems or hassles they had. But in order to do that, one has to understand the need for forgiveness and the need to trust. Now, if you forgive someone and you want to trust someone again, it involves letting go. You can forgive, but you can also remember, but the emphasis is on to keep glancing back in the mirror to see that what got you to Retrify, but not to use that as the main reason to move forward. So we try and get the couples to look ahead and say, okay, we're here, we got this far, we had problems, but how are we going to move on? And then we give them the tools that if a problem ever arises again, how do we deal with it quickly and in a safety environment where husband and wife feel secure in talking to each other about the problems, and to move forward. So not to constantly look at the reason why they got there, but how we're going to move forward. And we provide tools over the program. It's a 3-month program, as Jerry said, with the weekend and your post sessions. But the emphasis is on moving forward, on to forgive, and on to trust one another again.
So you've decided to come to the Renaissance of Marriage conference. How do you think people who have been attending the conference can move forward with joy from this conference? What do you think they can take back to their own communities and organisations?
Well, one of the things that I think Retrify offers is hope. It offers hope for marriages, regardless of the situation that you find yourself in. If you and your spouse are willing to take time out to, as Stephen says, look at your relationship and identify the areas of conflict, the areas that are causing the hurt and the pain in the relationship. There is a way of bringing healing by developing the communication skills that somehow have evaporated over the years, and kind of really learn to listen to each other again at a deep level. There is a way to bring healing to the heart in any relationship.
And that's what you call yourselves, the wounded healers? Am I getting that right?
Well, all of us experience pain and hurt in our lives. And this ministry is really a peer ministry. All of us have been hurt, all of us have been wounded. And so we are wounded healers. We share our own pain and how we have found our way through that pain, typically through a process of forgiveness that helps us to be able to share our story so that somebody else can see themselves in the story and find a way out of their own pain.
And what we find, especially in our ministry, is that couples who come on the weekend relate to us perhaps in an easier way than would a counsellor. A counsellor will come with the theory and his experience, but at the end of the day, perhaps he hasn't gone through the hurt that the couples have gone through. So somewhere in the process of our program, a couple will hear a story from a presenting couple and say, hey, that's me, that's us. We've gone through that problem. We've faced the same issues, and this couple have come through it. So why can't we? So they can relate at a deeper level with a way forward, because there's a witness in front of them to say, we've pulled through, we've come out where we were, and we're here. And so it gives hope, as Father Jerry said, to couples that they can relate to our stories and use the tools to get to a situation of we're at peace with one another again.
And often at a counselling level, there's some element of blame. A couple will usually end up at a counselling session, one of the couples usually reluctantly, and there's a sense that one has to be fixed and the other is kind of there to do the fixing and make sure that it happens. Retrivai, no one in the Retrivai program, none of us are counsellors. We're there, as I mentioned, as a peer ministry. And so there's some really courageous sharing of our stories. And typically what happens is the couples who come and participate in the weekend, there's no one blaming them. They're simply learning a communication skill. And inevitably what happens is in the sharing of our stories, as Stephen has just said, something clicks and they begin to recognize in a safe place and somehow that that's what I do too. And get insight into how that behavior is hurting the marriage or hurting the relationship.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your stories today with us, and thank you so much for coming to the Renaissance of Marriage Conference.
Thank you for having us. It's been great. Thank you.
I'd like to begin by saying I have a very special place for Australia in my heart. Many years ago, over 30 years ago, when I was a youngster, I was 23 years old, I came to Australia to find myself. And I found myself in Townsville. And in Townsville, I began discerning my call to priesthood. And from there, returned to Ireland to actually study for the priesthood. And then the Holy Spirit led the journey all the way to South Africa. Stephen and I are going to talk about Retrivai this afternoon. And Retrivai is a healing ministry for couples who are struggling. Both of us consider ourselves wounded healers. And in some way, that's the gift that we bring to this ministry. And that's what we hope to help others to find in the ministry themselves. Shortly after I was ordained, I was faced with the reality of couples or individuals coming to me for help or advice with their marriage. That was a fairly daunting prospect. I'd just finished my studies in the seminary and had some basic counseling skills, but felt wholly inadequate when it came to giving marriage advice. I'd grown up in a home where we had never spoken about marriage, really spoken about marriage, about what marriage involves, about the spirituality of marriage, about relationships, about love. I had read books about marriage. In college, I had studied the church's teaching about marriage and had learned all that canon law had to offer. In reality, however, I was probably more influenced by a naive image of marriage found in the movies and society generally, where couples live happily ever after. And if they didn't, they just got divorced and started over. The family, the marriage that I grew up in, looked nothing like the happy ever after marriages that you see in the movies. But it didn't end in divorce either. I thought our situation was unique, that my parents somehow were the only parents that got it so wrong. They went through some really difficult times when we were growing up, where conflict usually ended in an outburst, followed by silence, often for a week or two. And then life went back to normal. until the next upset or outburst. And so the cycle continued. Having seen a bit more of life now, I'm guessing that more than a few marriages end up in that in-between place, not really happy, but deciding to stick together for the sake of the kids or finances or some other reason. So when couples started coming to me as a young priest for advice about their marriage, I felt really apprehensive. What could I possibly say to a couple that would help them in their married life together, that would help them to deal with the issues they were facing, that would be of any value to them? To be honest, I really didn't know. Basically, I relied on the little bit of psychology and the counseling skills that I'd learned in the seminary, and the how not to insights gained from witnessing my parents' marriage. It took me 15 years of priesthood before I found Retrivai, a peer ministry that helps couples who are struggling in their marriage to find direction and healing. Retrivai is essentially a program that teaches couples how to communicate by identifying and describing what is going on in their emotional lives. It invites couples to open themselves to seeing things from another perspective. There's usually more than one way to do most things. Ours is not necessarily the only way. When two people decide to get married, they carry the story of their family of origin with them. Incidentally, the same thing happens when you become a priest. Whether consciously or unconsciously, the couple come to marriage with a script about how things are. They come with ideas about roles, values, ways of doing things, discipline, finance, etc., that may have worked or not in their own family, but that have nevertheless shaped their life up to this point. If they cling so firmly to their own understanding of how things are, they leave no room for growth. And ultimately, one or the other will feel left out, put down, or ignored. So Retrivai invites us to be teachable. Even though couples come into a Retrivai weekend with many hurts and hassles, we invite them to focus on the present moment, to learning the skills that will help them to give their marriage a chance. This obviously invites them to not concentrate on Julie and the past. The past is obviously something that has already happened and is now part of our makeup, but it is only a part and not the part we want the couples to concentrate on in their work Retrivai weekend. And so now I'm going to ask Stephen to share a little bit about how Retrivai has influenced his life.
As Father Jerry stated, Retrivai is a French word meaning rediscovery. This program helps couples deal with inevitable frustrations and conflicts that arise in marriage by giving them the tools to understand and express their emotions, the labo myth, the stuff that happens in their daily lives. In Retrivai, we have identified a number of different stages in marriage: romance, disillusionment, misery, and joy. As in the second and third stages, disillusionment and misery, the couples often throw in the towel and divorce, or simply stay in these stages for many years. The romance stage is the beginning of the relationship. Here, the focus is totally on another person who can simply do no wrong. This person is seen as the answer to all our dreams, the knight in shining armor. Any faults or imperfections that the person may have are just overlooked. This wonderful romance, however, is just an illusion. Most relationships begin at the emotional feeling level. We connect deeply and are willing to let things go because we understand and love each other. Over time, however, if we don't keep to it otherwise, our relationship moves from the heart into the head. With the pressure of work, family life, and the pressure on our time, we start communicating about the facts of our day rather than how those facts affected us. Once we begin to live in the head and ignore our emotional life, we move into a place of right and wrong, a battleground where one or the other has to win. And when no one wins, little annoyances and frustration become the order of the day. Over time, couples slip into the disillusionment stage of marriage. Sometimes the frustrations or annoyances may even be about something that we once admired in our spouse. To give you a personal example, while Sandra has always been very close to her family, in the courting days, I saw the relationship Sandra had with her family as a quality in her and thought, wow, what a wonderful person. However, shortly after her marriage, I started getting annoyed with Sandra as she continued with the same help to her families. Suddenly that wonderful wow became a problem, and I became disillusioned about where our marriage was actually going. From disillusionment, it's easy to slip into the third stage of marriage, the misery stage. Here our spouse is blamed for everything that goes wrong, and we start to believe that our own unhappiness is due to things that they may or may not have done. The fine qualities that we were once attracted to our spouse are still there, but these are now ignored. The roses are all gone, only thorns remain. It may be difficult to see any way out of misery other than separation or divorce. Closely linked to the second and third stage of marriage is what we call in retrovar the married single lifestyle. The married single lifestyle is a slow and instantly begun and often unconscious change in behavior after marriage, rather than an outright decision to live an independent and self-centered existence. It can develop because of the attitude that we sometimes bring into the marriage. We start a gradual trend where we begin thinking of our own interests rather than that of our spouse. Over the years, this change in thinking becomes predominant, and it seems normal that we are no longer doing things together. We do our own activities as a way of avoiding each other and to avoid the difficulties of a marriage relationship. In our relationship, Sandra and I lived as married singles for many years. Sandra's mum and dad had to move in with us because her dad got sick with Parkinson's disease and he needed full-time attention. Without realizing it, Sandra and I drifted apart. I would make plans to do my own thing with friends, while Sandra would work long hours and came home to assist her dad. We never seemed to spend time together, and for the next 7 years, we lived separate lives, even though we lived in the same house. It was in this period of married single lifestyle that I threw our marriage into misery by having an affair. This was a wake-up call that led us to retrofy, and perhaps why I'm talking to you here today. So how does one move from the disillusionment stage of marriage and hopefully avoid the misery stage to rather live a full and happy marriage? What we call the joy stage. In the joy stage, we no longer focus on ourselves as individuals, but now focus on us as a couple, unified in the true meaning of love. The Reconcile program is three stages. The first is a live-in weekend where 3 presenting couples and the priest share their personal stories and their journey to healing. This is followed by 12 follow-up sessions over a 3-month period. All the presenters are made up of a combination of teaching points which deal with various aspects of married life and how those new insights help the couple to come to a deeper place in their own relationship. For example, Redfire teaches that love is a decision. We can decide to love despite how we are feeling. Redfire priest often uses the following scenario to illustrate this point. Like the previous speaker, when couples have a new young baby, it's easy to love the child at 10 o'clock in the morning when he's been changed and smiling and all gooey. But at 2 a.m. in the morning, when you have a colic baby and he's crying the house down and you work in the morning, you don't feel like getting up, but you make the decision to love and get up and help that child. So we introduce that concept. Another aspect of the program helps us understand the influence of a family of origin and how this affects our thinking and our behavior. This was a key learning for Sandra and I when we saw its effect on our own relationship. In the program, we also speak about the importance of forgiveness and how a willingness to forgive locks in our heart and deprives us of healing. Lewis Smith once said, "To forgive is to set the prisoner free, only to discover that the prisoner is in fact you." Having learned that love is a decision and working towards forgiveness, we also need to make the decision to trust again. Redfire reminds us that the 4 stages of marriage can be repeated again and again in our lives. However, each time a couple will be more equipped to recognize where they are and hopefully come to an even deeper love. And during our session this afternoon, we'll have more time to talk about the structure of Redfire and to further expand on some of these concepts. Thank you.
I'm at the Renaissance of Marriage conference with the Culture Project. So guys, what did you like about Renaissance of Marriage this year and what's your biggest takeaway?
My biggest takeaway from the Renaissance of Marriage this year would just be hope, I think. Just seeing all the awesome people who are doing such amazing work with married couples, with engaged couples, in high schools, with young people like us. seeing that is just, and with the state of marriage today, I'm really hopeful that there can be changes in the future. Yeah.
Awesome. And I think personally for me, it's been the witness and the example of the married couples and families that are actually at the conference. And I think the way that they are evidently living out the call for each of us to practice and implement love and virtuous relationships in the household and in their outreach, whether it's hospitality or charitable works in their communities, is just so, as Pete said, inspiring. It's incredibly hopeful as young people who hopefully long for something like marriage one day, but even as like to be supported by like marriage as the unit within society is just awesome seeing the witness of couples here. And I'm really inspired by their dedication to living out true and fruitful marriages and just the witness of the family has been really amazing. Yeah.
Thank you. My biggest takeaway is probably very similar in that it's been the hope that's been shown to me through the witness of the people here, but also just the practicals that the speakers have been giving us over the past couple of days, the workshop activities where we can actually practically learn and practice ourselves some of the strategies they've been giving us. But then my favorite thing was actually in Mass today when I saw so many married couples together, and at the sign of the peace where it was all just, I don't know, you got to see both the husband and the wife there together, and the witness for everyone, the hope that it's giving all of us, and everyone coming together for unified purpose, which is really nice. Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely a one-of-a-kind conference, and it's been really great having you guys here.
Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Your biggest takeaway from the Renaissance of Marriage conference this year?
Firstly, it's been a real blessing to be at the conference. I think just to be surrounded by some like-minded people who really value our Catholic faith and value the sacrament of marriage. Some of my takeaways, there's so many. I mean, I've been going to so many interesting talks, and I think a great thing has been some of the skills that I've learned about parenting for young kids, and I guess the example of our marriage and what that can bring to the life of our kids. That's been one of my big takeaways. What about you, Fran?
Yeah, I think for me it's just being really affirmed in our vocation of marriage, and to see so many other young people from all across the country living out their marriage vocation, and just hearing all the wonderful speakers. And it's just been great to see so many people and know that our message is still very much relevant in our culture today.
I think the other cool thing is that just seeing so many lay organisations like Shalom Media, Real Talk, Living Well Media, all of these different groups who are actually not being constrained by the bureaucracy of some of our church channels, and are just lady getting up, stepping up and just going out and doing it. And it's praise God, it's just been inspiring to see.
Great. Well, thank you so much for joining us this year.
Cool.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Greetings from Brisbane, Australia, which is very far from where most of you are. In Jesus Christ, what we hear, what we discover is the good news. Here we find in Jesus Christ, crucified and risen, good news for everybody. And that's why Shalom Media really does have a contribution to make. Shalom Media is seeking to communicate to families and to show to the world the truth and the beauty of what the family is within the plan of God. May the blessing of God really come to you through all that is offered in Shalom World by Shalom Media. The word Shalom itself comes from Hebrew, as you know, and it means peace. May the blessing of God's peace, the Shalom of God, for which we were created, may it come to you from the God who is peace, the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. Amen.